Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
This real side experience would begin with my visiting the dentist, an innocent enough excursion, or at least that's how it initially seemed. I would have a tooth that required extraction, and I had booked an appointment by which the troublesome cuspid would be removed. I entered the dentist's, I registered my presence, and within moments would be beckoned within the operating theatre, seating myself where the 2 dentists present, 2 men, would gesture. Necessary was it to numb the area, the gums surrounding the tooth that was to be removed, all very standard procedure, and where an anesthetic would be administered via a needle and syringe, which would induce an insensitivity to a pain. But as one of the dentists secured the syringe, appearance-wise it was rather bulky, far more than was generally the norm. The external surface of it was translucent, allowing the contents to be rendered visible, and which were comprising of a glowing greenish-yellow liquid, that although on the physical, when one visits the dentist, the contents of the local anaesthetic tend not to be apparent, as the syringe's contents are not visible through its outer surface, and this seemed then to be an exception, and warning bells were sounding rather audibly, impressions suggesting something untoward was afoot. The entire affair had a certain dark force, ill-intended bouquet. Perhaps then it was more a situation that the dubious contents of the anaesthetic were only made apparent via the real awareness. For as we go about our real side activities, we are presented with the simulation, the surface level of our circumstances, but always there is more occurring than literally is being expressed. Underlying all simulation will be the ideas that generate it, not dissimilar to the mechanism by which data files of information code are rendered as graphics on our computer screens. For despite what is transpiring on the surface, there will be much that isn't apparent to the personal self alone, the personal self that can only evaluate and draw its determinations from the simulation as presented to it. That although personal self-assumptions can be made, if a guide is behaving somewhat uncharacteristically for a being whose only motivation is to support and assist all life and awareness, for example, then it's safe to ascertain that very likely we may have a being in our midst mimicking the outer form of said guide, and very likely for deceptive purposes. The real awareness, that which we all actually are, is a part of the isness everything and everything reality that permeates through all consciousness, the consciousness being the idea engine room from which all simulation stems. As such, the underlying idea foundation of any of the creational simulation we are experiencing will be available to the real awareness, where all intents, agendas, and deception, that which isn't surface, literal, front apparent, is unveiled and relayed to the personal self. Generally, the personal self will receive then impressions in addition to what can be determined from just the simulated experience alone, but on occasion these real awareness afforded insights will express as additional features to the scenery and environments we are in, as though an overlapping of the surface personal self-simulated situation with added detail to illuminate that which the personal self alone would be unable to determine. For as impressions via the real awareness would now reveal, I had in some shape or form been duped by the dark forces, drawn into a situation, and where I now was to be the recipient of the effects of doing so. But on the verge of this occurring, of being anesthetized, would this additional detail, the very suspicious, glowing, green-yellow contents of the anesthetic, be applied to the simulated scene. As we go about our real side activities, the dark forces will attempt to garner our agreement in whatever way possible. They will present ideas to draw us in, glean our focus and attention, that as an idea captivates and claims our focus, this is a tantamount to agreement with the idea, and where we will experience its nature. Anything created by the dark forces is forged by the hands of beings whose consciousnesses have a singular overall inclination and objective, that of control, subjugation, and the destruction of others. A created idea cannot be in isolation. It is intrinsically linked with and a part of the consciousness of the being who manifested it. Consequently, as we agree with an idea, we also agree with the ideas that are the consciousness of the individual who conceived it. We will accept and embrace then the dark forces' consciousness intentionality, and the effects will play out accordingly. We will experience control, subjugation, and potential eradication at their hands. For we cannot experience anything absent of the ideas being agreed with and consciousness installed, despite how powerful or technologically endowed other individuals or species may be. This creational cause and effect mechanism is known to the dark forces, and the means by which they can troll agreement to their domination involves the presenting of ideas that seem to have surface beneficial appeal, but are laced with additional unseen idea intentionality of control and suppression. That as the surface presented ideas are agreed with, so that which is behind the literal front also will be taken on, and an individual or species now can potentially be open to abuse and even elimination, all in accordance with the idea bundle agreed with, the surface idea, and the consciousness of ideas in affiliation with it. On the real side, then, will the dark forces present their ideas to allure, captivate, and snare our focus and attention, and should we indeed be drawn in, as we surrender agreement, we can expect to be the effect recipient of distorted ideas of control and domination, and our simulated situations in relation with the dark force creators of the ideas that claimed our agreement, will play out accordingly. This would be the case here, where the dark forces had snagged my agreement at some point, and what was now transpiring was the karmic effect fallout, my being potentially injected with a substance that would unlikely be especially beneficial. Of course, we are not resigned to our agreements. We can identify and release them, that as we extricate ourselves from the idea, so the effect can no longer apply, and we are liberated from that which is manifesting from such an agreement, extracting ourselves from the situations we find ourselves in. The dark forces will be aware of this possibility, hence the maintaining of the facade, the seemingly innocent dentist visit and operation, essential to perpetuate the illusion of innocence, until the objective is accomplished, the administering of whatever the local anaesthetic contained. But as I said, the additional detail was applied, that of the syringe's contents being made very apparent as to its questionable nature, and at that moment then would it be entirely possible to relinquish the idea agreement, and this would express as my liberation from the effects and situation. However, on occasion, despite our being apprised of the reality of our predicaments, the real awareness will still put the personal self through it. For as every experience are as viewpoint comparisons to recognize the all is from, it follows to cultivate as rich a range and diversity of experience as possible, as opposed to ceasing the experience at a certain point when it becomes alarming or unsettling for the personal self. And besides, as we allow the dark forces to impact us adversely, they now have accrued additional karma for themselves, and these effects can be leveraged and managed in ways that potentially can have them displaced, positioned that they no longer can operate adversely and in relation to others. Impressions revealed, the contents of the anaesthetic, if injected, would have adversity of repercussion, and however that may translate as, but regardless, I allowed this to occur. The needle was inserted into my gum, the glowing green-yellow liquid administered. I would then decide to take my leave, but the dentists insisted that still further administrations of the anaesthetic were required. I would refuse, however, to accept this, and be adamant as to my departure, and at that moment it seemed the game was up, the charade concluded. The dentists, the dark force characters operating in these roles, realizing the pointlessness of maintaining pleasantries, would attempt to assail me and forcibly inject me with more of the dubious fluid, both brandishing syringes in each hand. As I mentioned, as we release the ideas in association with our effected predicaments, we are tearing up our contracts in relation to the simulated situation and those involved, and our extraction from the experience will express in whatever way it might. In this case, the dentist's efforts would somewhat backfire, for I would fend off their frenzied, syringe-laden assaults, and symbolic of instant karmic backlash, would stick them with their own anesthetics. These additional shots were evidently designed to subdue and incapacitate. For the moment the dentists received whatever these subsequent syringes contained, they collapsed immediately to the ground. I'm uncertain what impact the initial administered serum will have, as nothing was revealed in regards to it, although by all accounts it wasn't deemed prudent to proceed further with this experience, where I would have been rendered unconscious, and whatever would then have been my fate. The scene would switch, and now I would be on a series of assignments and in the company of another individual. We were operating in what appeared to be a city, though it was a dark force-orientated position, and where we were securing all manner of items from what was considered a secure and very heavily guarded and monitored location. The items themselves would never be revealed as to their particulars, but the impressions was that of computer-like data streams of information, as a number of my previously shared real-side experiences have involved dealings with computer-like codes, data, their transportation to certain dimensional positions, and the pilfering of others from dark force positions and strongholds. Due to the extreme levels of security and surveillance in protection of the data coding the city contained, necessary was it to adopt outer disguises, that we could operate under the radar and go about our business undetected. The identity of my associate wasn't made apparent, and visually couldn't be discerned, for the scene had opened up with our operating in our altered form guises, and where we had adopted the outer body types of four-legged dogs, the perfect incognito means by which we could proceed unnoticed. It wasn't revealed as to the exact purpose of our data-stealing operation, but we were successfully doing so, as though we needed only be in proximity to the data coding contained in various computers, etc., scattered throughout the city, that it could be acquired. Our next target would be a large and very ominous-looking bank, and this was the most significant of our objectives. The data computer code contained therein of a paramount importance to secure. At the moment of our entering the bank, it should have been devoid of dark force individuals, as though we had been apprised of the movements of all individuals who would be operating within the building. The doors were unlocked, we poured at them, and they would yield to us, and our objective lay in the centre of the initial room of the bank we entered. That although visually nothing was present, this was the location we had to be to claim the data coding, as though what contained it was invisible, and yet our proximity to it would allow its securing, as was the case with all the other codes we had gathered. We crept forward, our bellies low to the ground, heading toward the centre of the room, but then were stopped in our tracks. For present in the room also would be a group of suited humans, sat around a conference-style table in the corner, deep in discussion, and impressions would reveal they were mafia-type characters. I have had a number of dealings with the mafia-style organisations on the real side, and of which operate as multi-dimensional enforcers on behalf of the dark forces they are in affiliation with. We rather froze in place, uncertain if we should proceed or retreat. The Mafia characters were aware now of our presence, but theoretically we should have simply been construed as a pair of dogs that had randomly entered the bank. This, perhaps, was the consideration of most of the Mafia characters sat around the table as they stared absently and with little interest in our direction, but for one of their number, that as it transpired was the most highly ranked of their organization, a Mafia boss type in other words. He would be far more aware than those of his lackeys, seemingly recognizing that we were more than what we outwardly appeared to be. Our retreat was cut off, as the other Mafia characters positioned themselves in front of our only exit, the door we had entered the bank through, and the Mafia boss would stride towards where we were positioned, looming over us and scrutinizing us with curiosity. A little like in the previous scene, where at a certain point the cat was out of the bag, so to speak, and the Dark Force dentists, no longer bothering with their charade, would attempt to assail me blatantly with their syringes, so this was rather the case here. The Mafia boss, knowing we were more than we outwardly seemed, would certainly not allow us to depart absent of determining our purpose, and very likely then our subsequent attempted elimination, and so with little point in perpetuating the pretence. Although maintaining our four-legged canine forms, I would engage with him verbally. Somewhat uncharacteristic of the general dog species, to be sure, my elongated muzzle formulating the words with effortless ease, and this would initially throw him, but confirm his suspicions that we were not simply animals that had wandered into the bank. I fail to recall exactly what I said to him, though the gist of it was of an attempting to appeal to whatever sense of righteousness he may have possessed, expressing that our operations were for the awareness benefit of all in the simulator, dark forces included, or something along those lines. Unmoved by my argument and delivery, he would request something of me, a demonstration of my ability. This is a relatively frequent occurrence in my real side experiences, as I have shared, that of my being requested to provide a demonstration of the abilities as made available via the real awareness. For as we go about our multi-dimensional activities and operate in the seemingly unlimited and boundless manner that we do, this rather draws the attentions of others who are curious as to the source of our capability. Oftentimes other individuals will then embark on their own processes of awareness to become equally as unlimited. A personal self-want and desire this may be, but initially this is always the reason for anyone stepping up and deciding to commence with their awareness process, for at that moment they will be operating still as the personal self, and their only motivation will be the determination of what self-gratifying sensation inducing thrills can be gleaned from that which they choose to become involved with. Only later will they begin to recognize their true essence, the real awareness, aside from the created personal self, and the realization and necessity of putting life ahead of and at the forefront of their intent and deeds, as opposed to the wants and desires of the personal self. And so, as we operate as we do on the real side, performing what may be construed as feats of supernatural ability, This will draw the interest of the personal selves of our spectators, and oftentimes be the catalyst for the decided launching of their awareness processes. On other occasions, individuals having witnessed our capabilities may require our assistance. And a number of real side experiences I have shared have involved this theme, and where on occasion, before I render my services, requested is it that I prove my ability, generally by way of a demonstration that reveals beyond doubt my suitability for the task required of me. In this case, it was as though whatever I said to the Mafia boss, although at that moment not swayed by my argument or proposition, requested a verification of my real awareness afforded abilities, as though this would be the assurances he required if he were to agree with whatever I had suggested. After conferring with my associate, what I performed while maintaining my canine body type made little sense to my personal self, and I cannot adequately describe it consequently, but it seemed to please and satisfy the Mafia boss, and impression suggested then that I had gleaned his agreement. We had now, very likely, another Dark Force character preparing then to step up and assist us, and considering he was a boss of one of these multi-dimensional Mafia enforcer organizations, he would have much by way of reach and influence that he could bring to bear. He and his cohorts were unaware of our operation, the data stealing, as this would be a detail I had chosen not to mention during our exchange. And so, not only had we secured our computer coding, including that which was contained in the bank, but had acquired the unexpected agreement from a relatively well-placed Dark Force character, that what was initially a drawback, the bank not being empty as we had predicted, had become in fact an opportunity for further agreement gleaning. There the experience would end, and it remains to be seen what further details I may be afforded in regards to the specifics of this computer code data pilfering from the Dark Forces in future real side experiences, and my further dealings and encounters with these multi-dimensional Dark Force Mafia-style organizations.